Namaskar. This is Akhilesh Bhargava. Welcome to Tit-Bits on Business and Finance with me. It was in 2019 that the Prime Minister set a target to make India a $5 trillion economy by 2025. That needed India to grow at a rapid pace year after year henceforward. But instead of being on an upswing, India's growth rate has been on a consistent downswing even much before this ambitious announcement was made by the Prime Minister. The slide in India's economic growth rate actually began in 2016, when the GDP growth rate was about 8%, and thereafter it has fallen by about 1% every year, such that it reached a dismal growth rate of 3% in quarter 4 of financial year 2020, which is in March last year. This erosion in the growth rate of India has happened during the tenure of a government that came to power in 2014 with the catchy election promise, the catchy slogan of return of Achhe Din and a bounty of much needed jobs for a country which was witnessing huge unemployment. These promises were never really delivered, and those slogans were thus forgotten in the 2019 elections very conveniently, and nothing is spoken about them now. The fact today is that most of the BJP promises and economic policies have failed to deliver the promised growth, which has made the domestic investor cautious today, and even the domestic corporates are unwilling to invest in new projects. And because of that, investment in new projects in India has hit a 16-year low. The very credibility of the Indian government in the matter of formulating economic strategy and policies to revive a stalled economy has taken a big hit due to the huge gap in its promises and performance, starting with its own flagship scheme of Make in India, which has hardly taken off. The very objective of Make in India has just not been achieved. Mere sloganeering has been the name of the game. And while the present economic crisis has been due to the COVID disruptions and lockdown, the reality is that by March 2020 itself, the Indian economy was anyway in a delicate and weak condition with little strength and stamina to bear the COVID crisis that came. And that explains why the government has just not had the money to announce a suitable and adequate fiscal stimulus to support the economy in this crisis. In a recent report on the Indian economy, the BBC has reviewed 7 years of the Modi rule, 7 years of the Modi government performance on the economic front. The highlights of the BBC report are worthy of a review. The report says that the thumping majority of the Modi government had raised hopes of big bang reforms to put the Indian economy on a rapid growth path which has failed to materialize. It notes that the government's economic record was anyway lackluster since 2014, and the COVID pandemic has now battered an economy that was already on an under par performance. So, economic performance, economic situation, not good. The report then says that the $5 trillion economy by 2025, as has been targeted by Mr. Modi, is a pipe dream. It was not possible even earlier, and now due to COVID and inflation, it is certainly ruled out according to the BBC. In the matter of growth, it says that the GDP growth rate was 7 to 8% when Shri Narendra Modi took charge, but by March 2020, it had dipped to a mere 3.1%. The growth of the Indian economy has suffered according to it due to the hasty rollout of GST, due to the failed demonetization and the intermittent lockdowns that have occurred since the time the COVID began. With the build-up of 36 kilometers of highways per day, setting up of solar and wind energy capacity of 100 gigawatts, and the pan-India supply of cooking gas, electricity, and now piped water to houses under progress, and the build-up of toilets, of course, the report says that infrastructure build-up has been the bright spot of the Modi government's track record. It gets marks for the infrastructure build-up, unlike the other analysis on various other points. The manufacturing sector has been stagnant, says the BBC, and the Make in India program has failed to draw investments into the sector or cut the red tape as was promised. The goal was to increase the manufacturing sector's share in GDP to 25% from the present 15%, and it continues to languish there. It points out that 50% of jobs in the manufacturing sector have been lost during the past 5 years alone. The report then says that India's annual exports have remained stagnant at about $300 billion per year for almost a decade, and India has lost market share in global exports even to the likes of Bangladesh. The ambitious public healthcare program that was announced by Mr. Modi in 2018 is nowhere, and India's spending on public healthcare remains among the lowest in the world according to the BBC report. It then points out that more than half of India's population still works in the agriculture sector but contributes very little to India's total GDP. Surplus labor in the agri sector needs to be absorbed in other sectors, which depends on the revival of investment by the private sector, which, as we pointed out, is at a 16-year low. What is needed is to ensure that labor from the agricultural sector, the surplus labor, is gainfully employed into opportunities in the manufacturing sector and in the service sector. And finally, the report says that GST has led to a rise in input costs in India, and demonetization has destroyed supply chains, particularly in the informal sector, some irreparably, and the Indian economy continues to reel under the pain of COVID. Not the best of review, not the best of opinions on the performance of the Modi government on the economic front. The reality is that the economic performance of the Modi government has been dismal and subpar, not just with regard to its own ambitious promises, but also in sheer absolute terms. A downward slide in growth year after year in a developing economy with a huge young population like ours, with a massive amount of unmet demand, is not just a matter of enormous concern, but is clearly a lost opportunity. The end of the unprecedented COVID to us will be the end of an era, which gives us an opportunity to make a fresh start. It is an opportunity for the government to restore its own credibility and bring back the confidence of the investor and the consumer so that they invest and they spend and growth takes off. According to us, it is an opportunity to do away with the past baggage and start again to transform and revive a sluggish and stalled economy. And for that, we think that the following needs to be done by the government. The first thing, the 7 years of the Modi government have been marked with a sheer unwillingness to accept the reality of a deteriorating economy. And to do that, they've covered it, they've shown it to be a rosy picture based on doctored statistics. That doctoring of statistics needs to go, and we need to be willing to accept the reality, however bitter the truth be. Denial of truth that stares in your face does not get the desired solution and the growth that we need. The second, we need to therefore get real. Stop slogans, stop all these election slogans which are not meant to be implemented, and get on with real policies to deliver on genuine promises that are made. The third one, suitable execution of policies is the key to a robust economy. An ordinary policy well executed is always preferred to some extraordinary announcement that never does take off. The fourth thing is the rising inequality between the big corporates, which have only grown bigger, and the MSME sector, which has only grown smaller, is a must for India's economic revival and growth. The MSME sector is a huge generator of jobs and GDP, and revival of the overall economy depends on revival of this vital sector. Let us not forget, it contributes to about 40% of India's GDP. The ever-increasing statutory compliances for businesses in India are a huge headache. They entail a big cost, and apart from that, they also erode the ease of doing business in India. It discourages entrepreneurs from getting on with growth. That needs to be amended. The next one, do not subvert statutory, independent and autonomous institutions. They need to play their role with independence and professionalism, and not just as yes men to the government, which has been happening of late in a big way. The next point, revive the banking sector, not through specious mergers and unending recapitalization, but through strictly enforced accountability on the banker and on the borrower too, which we have not seen. If you want to revive India's growth, you will need to revive the banking sector, which is also languishing today. The politics of governance need to shift towards federalism and inclusiveness in the spirit of India's democracy, which is contrary to what we experience today, and that hurts the economy. And finally, attract and convince the domestic corporates and investors to start investing in build-up of fresh capacity in India. It is they who hold the key to the revival of our economy, and it is they who need to be convinced. The larger picture, according to us, is that a cynical and disappointed voter may have forgotten the poll promises of Achhe Din, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't deserve or need the Achhe Din. That is his basic right, and no mehrbani on him by the vote-seeking politicians who come to power riding his votes. It is time to deliver now with the advantage that a post-COVID era would present, which is you can start with a new start, a reset without the past baggage, and implement policies without all those issues that have plagued policy making and performance of the government in the past. This is Akhilesh Bhargava signing off till we meet again. Namaskar.
Now be the first to know about the latest updates on our new news app. Go on your Android or iOS, search for HW News Network. Download our app, choose the language you prefer to get updates in, and be up to date with the latest news.